The Galactic Concordat had kept peace for 12,000 years. It was a system of laws that governed 847 different species across millions of star systems. The rules were simple. No species could attack another without cause. No species could take what belonged to others. And if anyone broke these rules, the arbiters would punish them. The arbiters were ancient beings of pure energy. They had powers that no one fully understood. They could freeze entire star systems in time. Ships would stop moving, people would stop breathing. Everything would pause until the arbiters decided the punishment was complete. In 12,000 years, no one had ever challenged them. No one had ever needed to. Humanity had joined the Concordat only 40 years ago. They were newcomers. Babies, really, compared to species that had traveled the stars for millions of years. The other species looked at humans with mild interest. They were clever, these humans. They worked hard. They followed the rules. They caused no trouble. The Veth hegemony was different. They were one of the founding members of the Concordat. They had helped write the laws 12,000 years ago. Their living ships were grown from flesh and bone. Their warriors considered battle an art form. They had fought 47 wars and never lost a single one. The Veth believed they were superior to all other species. They believed the younger races existed to serve them. The Veth had lawyers too, very good lawyers. For centuries, these lawyers had found small holes in the Concordat's laws. Little tricks that let the Veth take what they wanted without technically breaking any rules. The other founding species allowed this because the Veth were powerful and because the tricks were small. A mining world here. A trading post there. Nothing worth starting a war over. Then the Veth looked at humanity's colony world of New Cascadia. New Cascadia was beautiful. It had blue oceans and green forests, mountains touched with snow, cities filled with laughter and light. 2.3 million humans called it home. Families lived there. Children played in parks. Old people sat on porches and watched the sunset. It was a young colony, full of hope and dreams for the future. The Veth lawyers studied the old treaties very carefully. They found what they were looking for, a clause from 8,000 years ago. It said that unclaimed biological resources in certain sectors could be harvested by any Concordat member. The clause was meant for uninhabited worlds, places with useful plants or animals, but no intelligent life. The Veth lawyers argued that New Cascadia was in such a sector. They argued that humanity's claim to the planet was not properly registered. They argued that the humans living there were, legally speaking, not people. They were biological resources. The hegemony sent its harvest fleet. The people of New Cascadia had no warning. The Veth ships appeared in orbit on a quiet Tuesday morning. Strange beams of light touched the planet's surface. And then the harvesting began. The Veth did not use bombs or guns. They used collector fields. These fields lifted every human into the air. Men, women, children. Crying babies torn from their mother's arms. Elderly grandparents who had survived 100 years of life. All of them rose into the sky like leaves in a wind. The collector ships processed them. That was the word the Veth used, processed. Human bodies were broken down into a thick paste that could fuel the hegemony's living ships. 2.3 million people became food for alien vessels. The whole thing took less than 6 hours. When it was over, New Cascadia was empty. The city still stood. The park still had swings. The houses still had dinner tables set for meals that would never be eaten. But every human was gone. Not dead in the way that war makes people dead. Erased, turned into something else entirely. The Veth filed their paperwork. They followed every procedure. They submitted reports to the Concordat explaining what they had done and why it was legal. Then they waited for the arbiters to confirm their actions. Ambassador Ellen Vance represented humanity at the Concordat. She was 63 years old. She had spent her entire adult life building bridges between humanity and the older species. She believed in law. She believed in peace. She believed that civilization was better than chaos. She stood in the great chamber as the arbiters announced their verdict. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of species watched on screens and through viewing portals. This was an important moment. Everyone wanted to see how the young humans would react. The lead arbiter spoke. Its voice was like thunder mixed with music. It reviewed the Veth's arguments. It examined the ancient treaties. It considered the evidence carefully. Then it ruled that the harvesting of New Cascadia was technically legal. The chamber was silent. Some species shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded as if they had expected this outcome. The Veth representative smiled with all four of its mouths. Ambassador Vance stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. No tears, no anger, no shock. She looked at the arbiters with eyes that had become very cold and very empty. "Then your law has failed," she said. Her voice was quiet, calm, almost gentle. But something in those words made ancient beings feel afraid for the first time in millennia. She turned and walked out of the chamber. She did not run. She did not slam doors. She simply left, and she did not look back. Within 6 hours, every human vessel in the galaxy went dark. Communication channels closed. Diplomatic missions packed up and departed. Research stations shut down their equipment. Trading posts sealed their doors. Humanity went silent. The other species did not worry at first. The humans were clearly upset. They would need time to grieve. Eventually, they would return to the Concordat with requests for compensation or apologies. The Veth might have to pay a fine. Perhaps they would offer some empty words of regret. Things would return to normal. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Humanity remained silent. Ships that approached human space were turned away at the border. Not attacked, not threatened. Just firmly told to leave. The message was always the same, spoken by recorded voices without any emotion. Human space is closed. Depart immediately. The Veth hegemony laughed at this. They told stories about how they had taught the young humans their place. They said humanity would crawl back eventually. They said this was what happened to species that did not respect their betters. Behind the wall of silence, humanity was not grieving. Humanity was preparing. The galaxy forgot about humanity for a while. There were other matters to discuss. Trade agreements to negotiate, border disputes to settle. The Concordat had governed hundreds of species for thousands of years. One small race going quiet was barely worth noticing. Some species sent diplomatic ships to human space. They wanted to offer friendship. They wanted to gain favor with these hard-working newcomers. Perhaps they thought humanity would be grateful for support during this difficult time. Perhaps there were opportunities to be found. Every ship was turned away. The same recorded message played each time. No exceptions were made. No conversations were held. The humans simply said no and waited for the visitors to leave. Inside the wall of silence, something was happening that the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity had always been divided. Nations fought nations. Corporations competed for profit. Colonies argued with Earth. Religious groups disagreed with secular ones. Political parties accused each other of terrible things. This was normal for humanity. This was how they had always been. New Cascadia changed everything. The leaders of every human nation met in a great assembly. Presidents and prime ministers, kings and queens, corporate executives and colony governors, religious leaders and military commanders. They all came together in one place for the first time in human history. They did not argue about who was to blame. They did not discuss old conflicts or ancient hatreds. They did not worry about elections or profits or territory. They talked about New Cascadia. They talked about 2.3 million people who had been turned into fuel for alien ships. They talked about children who would never grow up. They talked about families erased from existence while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Then they signed a document. It was not a constitution. It was not a treaty. It was not a declaration of war in the normal sense. It was simpler than that. It was a single statement of purpose. One sentence that every human leader agreed to. One sentence that united a species that had spent its entire history fighting itself. The Veth will answer for New Cascadia. Everything changed after that. Factories that had made consumer goods started making weapons. Scientists who had competed for prizes started sharing their secrets. Military forces that had protected nations from each other started training together. Every resource humanity had was focused on a single goal. The numbers were staggering. Military production increased by 3,000%. Research projects that would have taken decades were completed in months. New technologies were invented, tested, and mass-produced faster than anyone thought possible. Humanity studied the Veth. They learned everything about their enemies. They learned how Veth ships were grown from living tissue and could heal from damage. They learned how Veth commanders thought about war. They learned that the hegemony had never lost a conflict in 8,000 years of conquest. Human strategists smiled when they read this. The Veth had never fought anyone like them. The other species made war like a game. There were rules, there were traditions. Ships would meet in space and exchange fire until one side surrendered. Commanders would send formal challenges before battle. The winner would take territory or payment. The loser would accept defeat with dignity. This was how civilized species behaved. Humanity did not care about civilization anymore. Human engineers built weapons that no one had ever imagined. Not ships exactly, not armies in the traditional sense. They built things that existed at the edge of what physics allowed. Things that broke rules the galaxy did not know could be broken. The scientists worked without rest. Many of them had family on New Cascadia. Many of them dreamed about children turned to paste. They did not sleep much. They did not need to. Rage kept them awake. 3 years passed in silence. The Veth hegemony grew confident during this time. They told themselves that humanity had given up. They told themselves that the young species had learned its lesson. They told themselves that this proved their superiority over all other races. Some other species were not so sure. They watched the wall of silence around human space. They listened for any hint of what was happening behind it. A few of them tried to send spy drones into human territory. None of the drones came back. Ambassador Elena Vance spent these 3 years on Earth. She walked through empty parks where children had once played. She visited schools where students had once learned. She attended memorials for the dead. She memorized names, all 2.3 million of them. She also attended meetings, secret meetings where admirals explained their plans, where scientists demonstrated their new weapons, where leaders discussed the timing of what was to come. The Veth would never see it coming. They expected war as they understood it, ships meeting ships, fleets clashing in space, a conflict that followed the rules they had helped write 12,000 years ago. What humanity planned was not war, it was punishment. The day finally came. Human ships began moving toward the borders of Veth space. Thousands of vessels, not the trading ships and research craft the galaxy had seen before. These were things of metal and fury. Weapons platforms built for one purpose only. A Veth border station detected the approaching fleet. The commander there was a veteran of many battles. He followed procedure. He activated his weapons. He sent a formal challenge to the human ships. This was tradition. This was how wars began. The challenge asked why humanity approached with hostile intent. It demanded to know their terms. It offered the chance for negotiation before blood was spilled. The human fleet did not respond. They did not slow down. They did not change formation. They simply kept coming, silent, relentless, an avalanche of steel and fire that cared nothing for traditions or rules. The Veth commander felt something he had never experienced before, something his species had not known in 8,000 years of unbroken victory. He felt afraid. Humanity's silence was finally about to break, and when it did, the galaxy would learn what happened when you took everything from a species that had nothing left to lose. The fury was coming. The border fortress of Keth Aernar had stood for 6,000 years. It was one of the largest military stations in Veth space. 200 warships defended it. 50,000 warriors lived within its walls. The commander there had fought in 12 wars and won them all. He watched the human fleet approach on his viewing screens. His officers counted the enemy ships. The numbers were smaller than expected, perhaps 300 vessels. The Veth had faced worse odds many times before. The commander sent another challenge. Protocol demanded 3 attempts before combat could begin. The humans did not answer the first one. They would not answer this one either. But rules were rules. His communications officer reported no response. The commander nodded. He ordered his fleet to form a defensive wall around the fortress. Standard tactics. Proven tactics. Tactics that had crushed enemies for millennia. Then something strange appeared on the sensors. The human ships were not moving toward Keth Aernar. They were moving around it, spreading out in a pattern the Veth computers did not recognize. The commander frowned. What were these newcomers doing? His science officer noticed something else. There was energy building in space. A lot of energy. More than any weapon should be able to produce. The readings made no sense. It was as if a small star had appeared from nowhere. The commander had 3 seconds to understand what was happening. Then Keth Aernar ceased to exist. The weapon was something humanity had built in secret. They had taken the magnetic field of a star. Somehow, through science the galaxy did not know existed. They had moved it across 40 light-years of space. They released it as a focused beam of pure solar fury. The fortress did not explode. It did not burn. It simply stopped being matter. 200 warships, 50,000 warriors, 3 nearby moons. All of them were erased, turned into expanding clouds of atoms that spread through empty space. No distress signal escaped. No warning reached the hegemony. One moment Keth Aernar existed, the next moment it was gone. The galaxy learned about this 3 days later. Veth patrol ships found the expanding cloud where the fortress had been. They searched for survivors. There were none. They searched for wreckage. There was none. Everything had been destroyed so completely that nothing remained to identify. The hegemony declared war. They gathered their fleets. They prepared for battle. But this was not battle as they understood it. Human strike groups appeared without warning throughout Veth space. They did not announce themselves. They did not issue challenges. They simply arrived, unleashed destruction, and vanished before anyone could respond. The Veth tried to fight back. Their living ships were fast and could heal from damage. Their warriors were brave and skilled. They had 8,000 years of military tradition behind them. None of it mattered. Humanity did not fight fair. They did not fight by any rules the galaxy recognized. They used weapons that seemed impossible. Gravity lances that crushed entire planets to the size of small rocks. Swarms of tiny machines that ate Veth ships from the inside out. Strange signals that made Veth crews go mad and attack each other. The Veth adapted. They found ways to counter some of these weapons. They developed new tactics. They fought with everything they had. Humanity simply used different weapons. Every time the Veth adjusted, the humans pulled something new from their arsenal of horrors. It was like fighting an enemy with unlimited imagination and unlimited hate. Veth worlds fell one by one. Not conquered, not occupied, just silenced. Human ships would appear, destroy all military targets, and leave. The civilians were not harmed. The cities were not touched. But every warship, every fortress, every weapon platform was reduced to dust. The arbiters called an emergency meeting. This was clearly illegal. Humanity was no longer part of the Concordat, but they were attacking a member species. The ancient laws demanded action. The lead arbiter announced that human space would be frozen in time. Their ships would be stopped. Their planets would be locked in stasis until they agreed to accept judgment. This was how the Concordat had maintained order for 12,000 years. The stasis projectors activated across human space. Nothing happened. The arbiters tried again. Their ancient technology reached out to freeze time itself. The power that had terrified 1,000 species for 100 centuries stretched toward humanity, and humanity pushed back. Human scientists had studied the arbiter technology. They had found its weaknesses. They had built devices that anchored their space to normal time. The stasis fields washed over human worlds like water over stone. They touched nothing. They changed nothing. For the first time in 12,000 years, the arbiters were powerless. The lead arbiter tried a third time. The result was the same. Human space remained free. Human ships continued their advance. Human weapons continued their terrible work. Panic spread through the Concordat. If the arbiters could not stop humanity, then nothing could. The laws that had maintained peace for so long were meaningless. The foundation of galactic civilization had cracked. The Veth hegemony called for help. They invoked ancient treaties. They reminded other species of old alliances. They promised favors and threatened consequences. 15 species answered the call. Together, they assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. Over 2 million warships gathered to stop humanity's rampage. Ambassador Elena Vance broke humanity's silence to address them. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy. She looked older than she had 3 years ago. Her eyes held something cold and hard, but her voice was calm. "We have no quarrel with you," she said. "The Veth murdered our people. The Veth will answer for that crime. You are not part of this. Stand aside, and you will not be harmed. Defend the Veth, and you choose to share their fate." She paused. The galaxy held its breath. You have one solar day to decide. The message ended. Humanity went silent again. In that single day, 12 species withdrew their fleets. Their leaders looked at what had happened to the Veth. They looked at the powerless arbiters. They decided that dying for the hegemony was not worth it. 3 species remained. They believed their combined strength was enough. They believed humanity was bluffing. They believed that no single species could challenge them all. They were wrong. The coalition fleet gathered at the edge of Veth space. 600,000 warships from 3 species. Ancient vessels that had won countless battles. Crews that had trained for war since childhood. Commanders who had studied tactics for centuries. They outnumbered the human fleet by more than 100 to 1. The coalition admirals felt confident. Yes, humanity had strange weapons. Yes, they had somehow blocked the arbiters. But no species could stand against such overwhelming force. The laws of physics still applied. Numbers still mattered. This would be the end of humanity's rampage. The human fleet arrived exactly when expected. 3,000 ships against 600,000. The coalition sensors tracked them carefully. The admirals gave orders to surround the smaller force. Standard tactics, proven tactics. Then the readings went strange. Energy signatures appeared that the coalition computers could not understand. Space itself seemed to bend around the human ships. Colors appeared that should not exist. Sounds traveled through the vacuum where no sound should be possible. The first human weapon activated. It was called a singularity bomb. Human scientists had found a way to create tiny black holes and aim them at targets. The gravity collapsed everything it touched into nothing. Ships, stations, debris. All of it compressed into points smaller than atoms. 50 coalition ships vanished in the first second. The admirals ordered a counterattack. Thousands of weapons fired at the human fleet. Plasma bolts, missile swarms, energy beams that could cut through anything. Most of them missed. The human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible. They jumped short distances instantly. They twisted through space like fish swimming through water. The weapons that did hit them struck shields that simply absorbed the energy. More human weapons activated. Something called a probability disruptor. It did not destroy ships directly. It changed the chances of things happening. Suddenly, weapons malfunctioned. Power cores failed. Critical systems broke in ways that should have been impossible. A battlecruiser found its ammunition exploding inside its own magazines. A carrier discovered its launch bays had sealed themselves shut. A destroyer watched its engine suddenly run backward, tearing the ship apart. The coalition commanders tried to adapt. They ordered their ships to spread out. They tried new formations. They called for reinforcements. The humans did not give them time. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 4 hours. It was not a fight between equals. It was a demonstration of power so absolute that the coalition admirals could not process what they were seeing. Human ships moved through the larger fleet like wolves among sheep. They struck without warning. They destroyed without mercy. They used weapons that made experienced officers question their own sanity. One human vessel fired something that made time flow backward in a small area. Coalition ships found themselves returning to positions they had held minutes ago, their weapons unfired, their shields undamaged. Then the area snapped back to normal time, and the ships exploded from stresses they could not understand. Another human weapon created mirrors in space. Energy beams bounced back at the ships that fired them. A dreadnought destroyed itself with its own main cannon. The coalition tried to retreat. The humans let them go. Any ship that turned and fled was allowed to escape. The humans did not pursue. They did not try to destroy the running vessels. But any ship that stayed and fought was erased. When the battle ended, the 3 coalition species had lost 80% of their military forces, hundreds of thousands of ships reduced to dust, millions of crew members dead, centuries of military tradition proven worthless in a single afternoon. Humanity had lost 6 ships. The surviving coalition vessels limped home. Their crews were broken. Their commanders were silent. They had seen something that changed them forever. They had seen what humanity could do when it decided to make war. The path to Veth Prime was now clear. The hegemony's homeworld was beautiful. Not as beautiful as New Cascadia had been, but impressive in its own way. 12 billion Veth lived there. Ancient cities covered the continents. Great monuments celebrated 8,000 years of conquest and glory. The Veth had some defenses left, orbital stations, ground-based weapons, a few thousand ships that had not been destroyed yet. But everyone knew these would not be enough. The human fleet took position around the planet. They did not attack immediately. They simply waited. Their weapons were ready. Their targets were locked. They could end 12 billion lives with a single command. The Veth leaders gathered in their great chamber. They debated what to do. Some wanted to fight to the death. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to negotiate. One of them, an old admiral who had fought humans during their expansion years ago, spoke quietly. He had studied humans. He understood them better than most. They are not here to destroy us, he said. If they wanted genocide, we would already be dead. They want something else. The others looked at him. What could humanity possibly want except revenge? The old admiral remembered something about humans, something that made them different from other species. They had strange ideas about justice, about punishment, about making things right. They want us to answer for what we did, he said. They want us to pay a price. But they will not kill everyone. That is not their way. Some of the other leaders did not believe him. They thought humans were animals, savages, monsters without honor or restraint. They were wrong. Ambassador Elena Vance began transmitting a message to the planet below. Her face appeared on every screen. Her voice reached every ear. 12 billion Veth watched the human woman who had lost everything to their government's greed. She looked tired, old, worn down by 3 years of war and grief. But her eyes were clear, her voice was steady, and her words would change the galaxy forever. Ambassador Elena Vance looked down at Veth Prime from the bridge of the human flagship. 12 billion souls waited below. Mothers held their children. Workers stopped their labor. Soldiers gripped their weapons. All of them waited to see what humanity would do. She thought about New Cascadia. She thought about the 2.3 million names she had memorized. She thought about the children who had been turned to paste, the families erased in an afternoon, the empty cities with dinner tables still set for meals that would never be eaten. She could destroy them all. Every Veth on that planet could be dead within minutes. Human weapons were aimed at population centers. Human soldiers were ready to land. Human fury was hungry for blood, but that was not why they had come. Citizens of Veth Prime, she began. Her voice was broadcast everywhere. We could do to you what your government did to our people. We have the power. Some would say we have the right. Your own laws would not condemn us. You made certain of that when you wrote them. She paused. The galaxy held its breath. But we are not you. Some of the human officers on the bridge looked surprised. They had lost family on New Cascadia. They wanted the Veth to suffer. They wanted revenge in its purest form. Ambassador Vance understood their feelings. She shared them. But she also understood something more important. We did not come here for genocide, she continued. We came here for justice. Your Concordat could not provide it. So we will. She outlined humanity's terms. They were harsh. They were absolute. But they were not extinction. The Veth hegemony was dissolved. The government that had ordered New Cascadia's destruction would cease to exist. Every official who had signed that order, every administrator who had approved it, every military commander who had carried it out would be taken to Earth. They would face trial. They would be judged by human courts. The Veth species would lose their right to space travel for 100 years. Their ships would be destroyed. Their stations would be dismantled. They would be confined to their home system under human supervision. Their children would be educated about what their ancestors had done. Schools would teach the truth. Monuments would remember New Cascadia. No Veth would be allowed to forget, but the Veth people would live. Their civilians would not be harmed. Their cities would not be destroyed. Their families would remain whole. This was not mercy in the traditional sense. It was something else, something that the galaxy had never seen before. The Veth leaders debated for 6 hours. Some wanted to reject the terms and fight to the death. They would rather die than surrender their pride. Others pointed out that death was exactly what they would get. Human ships surrounded their world. Human weapons were pointed at their hearts. There was no escape. In the end, they agreed. The war criminals were collected, 7,000 officials and officers who had played a role in New Cascadia. They were transported to Earth in chains. The trials would take years. Every detail of the genocide would be exposed. Every decision would be examined. Every guilty person would be punished. Human ships landed on Veth Prime. They did not come as conquerors. They came as overseers. They began the long work of dismantling the hegemony's military. Warships were melted down. Weapons were destroyed. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for 8,000 years was reduced to a population confined to a single star system. The galaxy watched in amazement. Then humanity turned to the Concordat itself. The arbiters waited nervously for judgment. Their power had failed. Their authority had been proven hollow. They expected humanity to destroy them as they had destroyed the Veth military. Instead, Ambassador Vance presented something different. Your laws failed, she told the assembled representatives of 847 species. They allowed children to be turned to paste while lawyers found loopholes. They permitted genocide as long as the paperwork was correct. Your system protected the powerful and abandoned the weak. She displayed a new document, a new framework of laws. Humanity had spent 3 years writing it while they built their weapons. Legal experts and philosophers had worked alongside scientists and engineers. This is how law should work, she said. No loopholes that permit atrocity, no exceptions for powerful species, no technicalities that allow genocide. Every thinking being has rights. Every crime has consequences. Every victim deserves justice. The representatives read the document carefully. It was comprehensive. It was clear. It was fair in ways the old Concordat had never been. You may adopt this voluntarily, Ambassador Vance said, or you may watch us enforce it. Those are your only options. The vote took 3 days. Representatives argued about details. They worried about losing power. They feared what humanity might do if they refused. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The new galactic law replaced the old Concordat. The arbiters remained, but they now served the law rather than controlling it. Their power was limited. Their actions were overseen. They could never again fail to protect the innocent. Humanity did not claim leadership. They did not want an empire. They did not seek to rule the galaxy. When the new system was established, human ships withdrew to their own space. Human diplomats returned to their posts. Human people resumed their quiet lives among the stars. Ambassador Elena Vance retired to a small house on Earth. She tended a garden. She watched sunsets. She visited the memorial for New Cascadia every year on the anniversary. She never forgot the names, all 2.3 million of them. But she also never forgot what humanity had taught the galaxy. Some lessons required fury to deliver. Some truths could only be spoken with weapons. Some justice could only be found through fire. The Veth eventually earned their way back to the stars. It took 200 years instead of 100. Their descendants were different. They remembered New Cascadia. They taught their children about the horror their ancestors had committed. They never forgot the price of cruelty. Other species remembered too. They remembered what happened when you harmed humanity's children. They remembered that some crimes could not be hidden behind legal words. They remembered that the young species from Sol was capable of terrible things when pushed too far. The galaxy became a better place. Not perfect, not paradise, but better. The law protected everyone now, and everyone knew who protected the law. In the great chamber where the Concordat once met, a new inscription was added to the walls. It was written in every language of every species. It summarized everything humanity had taught the galaxy in those terrible years. The words were simple. Justice cannot be stopped. Mercy can be earned. Choose wisely. Humanity went back to being quiet newcomers. They traded, they explored, they built and created and dreamed. Most species found them pleasant enough, hard-working, clever, good neighbors. But every species also knew the truth. Every species taught their children the story of New Cascadia. Every species understood what slumbered behind those friendly smiles and helpful hands. Humanity hoped they would never have to show their fury again. They hoped the lesson had been learned forever. But if it ever needed to be taught again, they would be ready. They would always be ready.